It is day 66, and Nancy Guthrie is still missing. Federal investigators now possess digital evidence from a disabled camera that local police never saw. The physical crime scene was compromised almost immediately by initial responders. The digital footprint remained largely intact on remote servers. An 84-year-old woman vanished from a seemingly secure location without a trace. The timeline of her disappearance is incredibly narrow and highly specific. We are examining a critical window of action that defies standard forensic logic. During this precise time frame, a calculated sequence of events unfolded. A masked suspect was captured on surveillance footage approaching the property. This individual systematically dismantled the primary security apparatus at the residence. Local authorities initially handled the situation as a routine search and rescue operation. They assumed an elderly individual simply wandered away from the home. This operational decision fundamentally altered the trajectory of the entire investigation. Vital, physical evidence was irrevocably damaged during those crucial early hours by deputies walking through the area. The Federal Bureau of Investigation eventually assumed control of the digital forensics. Agents retrieved residual data from the backend servers of the home security network. The data stream did not completely terminate when the lens went dark. Modern security systems continuously upload data packets to cloud servers. When a device is physically destroyed, the final transmission is often preserved. Investigators analyze these microscopic fragments of data to reconstruct the final seconds before disconnection. The Federal Bureau of Investigation specializes in this exact type of digital reconstruction. Their involvement indicates that the local police failed to secure all available data streams. They have the visual or auditory record of what occurred after the camera was manually disconnected. The public has been explicitly denied access to this specific evidence. The federal agency cited the integrity of the active investigation for their silence. This refusal creates a severe informational void regarding the perpetrator and their methods. The silence from federal authorities suggests the recovered information is highly sensitive or graphically disturbing. We are left to analyze the perimeter of the crime while they hold the center. If you want to understand the exact mechanics of this disappearance, you must follow the data. Subscribe to Tracking Evil with John as we reconstruct the timeline the authorities refuse to clarify. The physical environment can be sanitized by a careful suspect. Digital memory is far more resilient and difficult to erase completely. We must examine the exact chronological markers of that night. The truth exists somewhere in the server logs currently held in federal custody. The established sequence of events begins on the evening of January 31st. Nancy Guthrie required daily medication and relied on a cardiac pacemaker for survival. Tommaso Cioni drove her to her residence after a family gathering. He confirmed she entered the house safely at exactly 9:50 in the evening. The garage door was documented closing securely behind her. The environment was completely undisturbed at that specific moment in time. There was no indication of any impending threat to her safety. The situation shifted drastically in the early hours of February 1st. At 1:47 in the morning, an unidentified male suspect approached the property. He stood approximately 5 feet 9 inches tall. He wore a facial covering and carried a black 25-liter backpack. He possessed a firearm and moved with clear tactical intent. His primary objective was the doorbell camera monitoring the front entrance. The suspect demonstrated a specific understanding of residential surveillance vulnerabilities. He successfully disabled the recording device to conceal his subsequent actions. The family discovered the disappearance the following morning when she failed to attend a scheduled church service. They immediately contacted emergency dispatchers to report her missing. Law enforcement arrived to find a highly disturbing contradiction at the scene. A substantial amount of blood matching the victim was located on the front porch. The interior of the home presented a completely different and perplexing reality. There were absolutely no signs of a physical struggle inside the residence. The rooms were reportedly described as immaculate by those who viewed the interior. The physical parameters of the abduction do not align with typical home invasion profiles. The entry point and the extraction method remain entirely contradictory. We must analyze how a frail, elderly woman was removed from an untouched house. The operation left violent forensic evidence strictly on the exterior concrete. So, the official timeline provided to the public essentially ends there. We are now going to peel back the first layer of what actually happened. We must examine the spatial parameters of the crime scene to understand the primary anomaly of this investigation. Law enforcement discovered the rear entry point completely unsecured the morning after the abduction. The back door was left wide open, while the interior of the residence presented a chilling contradiction. According to initial visual assessments, the residential spaces were reportedly left in an immaculate condition. Investigators noted a complete absence of overturned furniture or displaced household objects. There were absolutely no visible signs of a desperate physical struggle inside the primary living areas. This structural perfection defies every established psychological profile of a standard residential home invasion. A violent extraction of an unwilling individual typically generates a massive debris field of trace evidence. Victims intuitively grab door frames and instinctively knock over lamps in a desperate bid for survival. An elderly woman facing a masked intruder would logically attempt to generate noise or resist the assault. The pristine environment suggests the perpetrator achieved immediate physical control without initiating a chaotic confrontation. This level of immediate incapacitation requires a highly specific operational methodology and physical dominance. The suspect managed to silence the victim before she could disrupt the meticulous order of her home. The clinical neatness of the interior space heavily contrasts with the violent reality waiting outside. Investigators located a significant quantity of blood matching the victim directly on the front porch concrete. The biological evidence confirms a traumatic physical injury occurred on the exterior perimeter of the property. We are faced with two fundamentally incompatible forensic realities existing within feet of each other. The interior environment reflects a silent and highly coordinated operation lacking any chaotic variables. The exterior environment reflects a catastrophic physical event resulting in immediate and substantial blood loss. The perpetrator bypassed the disabled front surveillance camera to access the vulnerable rear entry point. He subsequently transported the incapacitated victim back through the structure toward the front elevation. The suspect carried a 25-liter backpack, which is volumetrically insufficient to conceal a human body. The bag likely contained the specific instruments utilized to maintain the immaculate condition of the interior. The suspect did not enter the residence with the intention of acquiring financial assets or valuable property. He executed a targeted extraction that maintained absolute environmental control until the exterior threshold was crossed. The sudden appearance of biological evidence on the porch indicates a critical failure in the extraction protocol. Something catastrophic occurred exactly at the boundary line between the controlled interior and the exposed exterior. The suspect either dropped the victim or inflicted a severe secondary injury during the final transportation phase. The lack of interior blood trails confirms the primary trauma was isolated strictly to the outdoor concrete. This spatial discrepancy forces us to evaluate the exact physiological state of the victim during the removal. If there was zero struggle inside the house, how does a frail 84-year-old woman leave the premises with a masked man? The physical evidence contradicts itself, but the digital telemetry provides a concrete chronological marker. Medical technology offers a highly precise method of tracking a patient experiencing severe physiological distress. Nancy Guthrie relied on a sophisticated cardiac pacemaker designed to regulate her heart rhythm continuously. These modern medical implants operate by transmitting constant telemetry data to a designated cellular device via wireless protocols. The synchronization between the internal cardiac hardware and the external software application creates a permanent biological timeline. This digital pulse serves as an irrefutable digital witness to the physiological status of the patient. The chronological data reveals a terrifying progression of events following the initial camera deactivation. The suspect neutralized the primary visual surveillance system at precisely 1:47 in the morning. Another camera angle captured the masked individual maneuvering around the property at 2:12 in the morning. The most critical data point in this entire investigation registered exactly 16 minutes later. At 2:28 in the morning, the cardiac monitoring application suddenly lost all connection with the implant. The wireless synchronization completely terminated, and the digital pulse flatlined within the secure server logs. This specific timestamp represents the exact moment the biological timeline ends and the forensic timeline officially begins. We must analytically dissect the mechanical and physiological implications of this sudden digital disconnection. A medical application ceases communication for only a highly restricted set of specific technical reasons. The cellular device receiving the transmission could have been intentionally destroyed or manually powered down by the suspect. The victim could have been transported beyond the standard wireless proximity range of the designated receiving device. The third and most disturbing possibility involves the catastrophic failure of the cardiac hardware itself. The perpetrator would require specialized medical or technical knowledge to intentionally disable a secure Bluetooth telemetry signal. The average home invader does not possess the operational awareness to jam specialized cardiac synchronization frequencies. This suggests the suspect either systematically dismantled her communication devices or the victim suffered a fatal cardiac event. The 41-minute window between the camera deactivation and the pacemaker disconnection contains the entire sequence of the crime. The public is currently debating whether the suspect possessed the technical sophistication to manipulate medical software. The alternative scenario is that the 2:28 timestamp marks the exact moment of biological termination. If you want to analyze the ongoing developments of this digital forensic trail, you must subscribe to Tracking Evil with John. We will continuously monitor these technological discrepancies to build the timeline the authorities refuse to publish. A pacemaker does not just lose connection without a catastrophic event. At 2:28 in the morning, the only witness inside that house was not human. It was digital, and it was silenced. The biggest threat to solving this case was not just the man in the mask. It was the first 12 hours of the police response. The initial investigative phase is statistically the most critical period for securing transient physical evidence. We must examine the immediate operational decisions made by the responding deputies in Pima County. When the family discovered the victim missing, they immediately engaged the emergency dispatch system. The responding officers initially classified the situation as a standard missing person scenario involving a vulnerable adult. The local authorities operated under the assumption that an elderly woman experiencing cognitive decline simply wandered away. This critical misclassification dictated the entire tactical approach of the initial search and rescue deployment. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos directed his deputies to treat the residence as a search origin point rather than a primary crime scene. Dozens of emergency personnel systematically moved through the property to establish a perimeter and initiate grid searches. These initial responders actively contaminated the immediate physical environment surrounding the residence during those crucial early hours. They walked across the exact pathways the suspect utilized to transport the victim from the interior to the exterior. The responding units effectively compromised the delicate trace evidence left behind during the violent extraction. The decision to prioritize a search and rescue protocol over a homicide investigation destroyed the purity of the forensic site. The pristine interior of the residence should have immediately triggered a criminal investigation protocol. An elderly individual wandering away does not leave a massive quantity of biological material on their own front porch. The glaring contradiction between the immaculate rooms and the exterior blood evidence was completely ignored by the initial command structure. The physical parameters of the scene clearly indicated a hostile event, but the authorities refused to pivot their operational strategy. The sheriff maintained the wandering hypothesis long after the physical evidence demanded a criminal approach. We are witnessing a catastrophic institutional failure that fundamentally compromised the possibility of a rapid resolution. This operational negligence forced the federal authorities to rely almost entirely on secondary digital data. The initial responders destroyed the physical map the suspect left behind on the property. The local authorities treated a crime scene like a misplacement, but they forgot that while physical evidence can be trampled, digital evidence leaves an echo. We are now faced with a series of severe complications that contradict the official narrative of a simple abduction. The timeline of the suspect's movements presents a highly problematic logistical puzzle. The unidentified male initially appeared on the front surveillance camera at 1:47 in the morning. The federal authorities confirmed he successfully disabled that specific recording device to mask his entry. The same suspect was subsequently captured on a different camera angle at 2:12 in the morning. This secondary footage places him in a distinct location on the property 25 minutes after the initial deactivation. This precise chronological gap raises a critical question regarding his operational efficiency within the residence. A rapid extraction protocol requires the perpetrator to locate the victim and secure control within minutes. 25 minutes is an agonizingly long period to remain active inside a targeted location during an abduction. This extended duration suggests the suspect was engaged in a secondary objective beyond the immediate removal of the victim. We must also analyze the physical constraints of the specific equipment the suspect chose to carry. The federal press release confirmed the masked individual utilized a 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack. This specific carrying capacity is mechanically inadequate for concealing a human adult. The suspect therefore required a separate mechanism to transport the victim away from the property. He either utilized a vehicle, parked off camera, or carried her physically across the neighborhood perimeter. The backpack likely contained the specialized tools required to maintain the immaculate condition of the interior during the assault. It may have also contained the technical equipment utilized to interface with the residential security networks. The local authorities completely lost control of this complex narrative during their initial public briefings. Sheriff Nanos conducted a highly scrutinized press conference on February 2nd to address the escalating community concerns. The sheriff appeared visibly disorganized and repeatedly struggled to articulate a coherent timeline of the investigation. He reportedly began to disclose a highly specific detail regarding the suspect before abruptly stopping himself mid-sentence. This sudden self-censorship created an immediate wave of suspicion regarding the actual status of the evidence. The local authorities were clearly in possession of classified information they were unprepared to release to the public. The sheriff's hesitation confirmed that the official statements were actively omitting critical data points. The investigative failures of the local deputies forced a jurisdictional shift in the management of the forensic data. The Federal Bureau of Investigation assumed primary responsibility for reconstructing the compromised digital timeline. The local police were losing control of the narrative, which is precisely why the FBI stepped in to retrieve what was wiped from the physical cameras. The involvement of federal agents introduced the final and most disturbing layer of this investigation. The Federal Bureau of Investigation successfully accessed the primary corporate data servers for the security network. They executed advanced digital recovery protocols to analyze the exact period of the surveillance blackout. Federal technicians discovered that the hardware destruction did not completely terminate the video upload sequence. The system managed to transmit microscopic data packets to the cloud during the physical assault. The agency officially confirmed they successfully recovered residual imagery from those specific remote backend systems. This technological breakthrough represents the absolute pinnacle of forensic evidence in this active investigation. We are now confronting the most enraging paradox of this entire law enforcement operation. The authorities are actively requesting community assistance to identify the masked suspect carrying the backpack. They utilize press conferences to beg for localized tips and neighborhood surveillance submissions. However, they are simultaneously refusing to release the one piece of evidence that could expose him. The federal government has categorically classified the recovered digital footage, citing strict operational security protocols. This deliberate concealment forces the public to critically question the exact nature of the recovered visuals. The authorities claim the release of the footage would severely compromise their ongoing operational integrity. This standard bureaucratic justification fails to satisfy the logical demands of a stalled public manhunt. The footage might reveal an extraction method so highly specific that it identifies a particular organization. The suspect might have utilized specialized tactical equipment that immediately betrays his professional background. It is also highly probable that the footage exposes further catastrophic failures by local law enforcement. The recovered video could contradict the official timeline previously established by the local sheriff. We must analyze the psychology of an investigative body that chooses suppression over public cooperation. They are prioritizing their internal control of the narrative over the rapid identification of the perpetrator. The public is essentially flying blind, while the definitive visual answer sits secured in a federal vault. The community is expected to locate a suspect using only a vague physical description. Meanwhile, the investigators possess the high-resolution reality of those final critical moments on the porch. This informational asymmetry generates massive public distrust regarding the ultimate objectives of the task force. We are left to analyze the periphery of this crime while they stubbornly hold the center. If you demand absolute transparency in these stalled federal investigations, you must subscribe to Tracking Evil with John. We will systematically continue to pressure these specific agencies until the backend server data is finally declassified. Our channel specializes in dissecting the forensic data that the mainstream authorities attempt to bury. The federal agents currently possess the exact digital record of the events between 147 and 212. They know exactly what happened on that property during that critical 25-minute time frame. The question is no longer just where Nancy is located today. The real question is why the objective truth of her disappearance remains completely classified. We must now critically evaluate the current operational status of this completely stalled investigative process. More than 60 excruciating days have elapsed since the digital cardiac pulse officially terminated. The combined local and federal task forces have systematically failed to produce a single viable suspect. The family continues to wait for a definitive resolution that the current forensic trajectory cannot guarantee. The physical perimeter of the residence offers absolutely no further clues for the specialized recovery teams. The tactical delay during the initial response window permanently erased the most critical environmental markers. We are currently observing an ongoing case that exists almost entirely within a massive digital vacuum. The federal authorities actively refuse to articulate whether they consider this a recovery or rescue mission. This deliberate ambiguity prevents the public from understanding the true biological stakes of the current search. The local sheriff has significantly reduced his public appearances following the disastrous initial press briefings. The official updates have devolved into standard template responses, offering zero actual investigative substance. There are two massive analytical voids that continue to intensely haunt this specific true crime community. We still do not know what the masked suspect transported inside that 25-liter backpack. The volumetric capacity suggests tools for incapacitation rather than a mechanism for human concealment. We also do not firmly know why the pacemaker disconnected at exactly 2:28. The forensic community remains divided on whether this indicates technical sabotage or ultimate biological termination. The suspect either possessed the precise technological capability to jam secure medical telemetry frequencies, or the timeline indicates the exact chronological moment the victim suffered a fatal physiological event. These unresolved anomalies represent a profound systemic failure of the modern criminal justice apparatus. The community demands concrete answers while the agencies hide behind the protective shield of classified investigations. A massive federal apparatus is currently paralyzed by a single individual who understood camera placements. The passage of time statistically degrades the probability of a successful geographical location of the victim. Every single day that passes allows the digital trail to become further detached from physical reality. The biological evidence on the porch has long since been sanitized by professional hazardous material teams. The destroyed surveillance cameras have been systematically replaced with new upgraded hardware by the family. The physical environment has returned to a state of deceptive and quiet residential normalcy. The digital footprint of 228 remains the only honest witness left in Pima County. In modern forensic science, a destroyed surveillance device operates as a highly detailed map. The contemporary residential environment is heavily saturated with interconnected Internet of Things devices. These digital mechanisms continuously transmit environmental data to remote secure cloud servers. A perpetrator can easily sanitize a physical location using basic chemical cleaning agents. They cannot easily erase the synchronized digital telemetry transmitted by a medical implant. The integration of cardiac monitors and smart security networks creates an invisible perimeter. This invisible perimeter constantly generates a permanent chain of custody for specialized federal investigators. Law enforcement agencies increasingly rely on these microscopic data packets to solve complex abductions. Criminals consistently underestimate the resilience of automated digital backup protocols. A physically smashed camera lens does not terminate the upload of the final captured frames. The data stream simply reroutes the captured imagery to an off-site secure storage facility. Understanding this technological reality is absolutely critical for your personal residential security. The integration of residential technology fundamentally alters how we analyze violent crime scenes. A localized security system relies entirely on the physical integrity of the recording unit. An internet of Things network decentralizes the critical evidence across multiple geographic server locations. This decentralization prevents a localized suspect from achieving total informational control. We must evaluate our own personal security infrastructure through this exact analytical lens. Your security cameras must be hardwired and synchronized to an external cellular backup protocol. If a masked suspect cuts your primary broadband connection, the cameras must continue transmitting. Medical telemetry applications must also feature automated emergency protocols for sudden signal terminations. The sudden loss of a Bluetooth medical connection should immediately trigger an automated emergency dispatch. We cannot rely on local authorities to rapidly interpret physical crime scenes accurately. The initial responders in this specific case demonstrated severe analytical deficiencies during the critical window. We must rely on automated digital systems to immediately alert remote monitoring agencies. Your digital footprint is currently your most reliable witness during a catastrophic residential intrusion. This case proves that while physical tracks fade away, the digital timeline is permanent. We are continuously monitoring the federal databases for any authorized release of this classified information. The central contradiction of this entire investigation remains completely unresolved by the active task force. A frail 84-year-old woman vanished without disrupting a single piece of interior furniture. The authorities possess the exact digital video file that explains this physical impossibility. They actively choose to withhold this critical visual data from the investigating public. The investigative agencies are operating under the false assumption that public interest will eventually diminish. They expect the digital anomalies of this case to fade into the background of the news cycle. We utilize objective forensic analysis to ensure these discrepancies remain at the forefront of the discussion. The timeline between the camera deactivation and the medical disconnection demands a comprehensive public explanation. A federal agency cannot indefinitely suppress the digital reality of a violent residential abduction. We will relentlessly cover every single development and unseal every restricted document in this investigation. We will systematically dismantle every public statement issued by the local sheriff and federal agents. You must remain vigilant and continuously question the official narratives provided by these law enforcement agencies. Subscribe to Tracking Evil with John to ensure you receive the immediate forensic analysis. Because when the Federal Bureau of Investigation finally breaks their silence, we will be here to analyze the fallout. The suspect carrying the black backpack is currently relying on the extreme secrecy of the government. The refusal to release the residual server data actively protects the perpetrator from public identification. We will not allow this digital evidence to quietly disappear into a classified federal archive. The family of the victim deserves the transparency that the digital server logs can immediately provide. 66 days is a long time to hide a truth that is already sitting on a federal server.